Hello, everyone. Bernita here. Thank you for joining me wherever you are, whether you're beginning your day or ending your day. Thank you so much for spending this time with me. This video is going to be very different, probably different from the last few videos that I have done. I'm not going to give you a whole spiel about who I am, what I do in the world, School of Brilliance, and I help brilliant people live incredible lives through a series of things. I am going to talk about the practical applications. Well, I have talked about that on my channel. I have a playlist of practical applications, but this would be a different approach. I did this section with a group of people live to get feedback and everything like that. And I was going to do another round of that, but I was like, you know what? Let me go ahead and just jump in. But if you are new to me, you want to know more about me and be connected, one great place to start is my book, Dr. Renita Glenn White, .com slash new dash book, or you can go to drvernitaglenn-white.com/resources and connect with me there for complimentary live classes and other resources that will be up. If they're not up, they will be up shortly. So when I labeled this training, and this is going to be like a Bible study time. So when I did it with the first group, it was like an hour. And, even though I've taught for like a long period of time, it's still different when you have people like logging off, even though I know we've been on like Zoom and video conferencing for years now, but it's still something like when people log off and you're like, and you kind of want to rush. So I was like, instead of just doing that, let me go ahead and get this lesson out because it has been in my journal when I did it like since September 4th of 2023. And I did it with the live group maybe somewhere in January, probably the last week of January 2024. And at the time of this recording, um, I'm doing it again here, but I'm going to take my time and go through it because I think it's a very interesting concept. When I was studying this, I've heard this story. I'm going to read all three passages of this story, same passage, but different perspectives. And if you grew up in church or if you know about Bible stories, you've heard of this story so many different times. But I want to share the revelation that I got from this from a coach's perspective, especially in the personal development space, but this could go for any coach. There's been a lot happening in the coaching industry and the personal development space, I believe, and I that I've seen, and I believe that we've taken God out of the self-help industry. And although I was moving in that direction of life coaching and helping people and do all that, and have clients, I've been doing that. It was still something that was kind of off, and I've been wrestling with it, especially trying to do like both things because it's like, well, you don't want to say God too much. And it was like, oh, absolutely. Yes, I am. Because you can't just go through coaching, especially if you're a Christian. So I'm not going to say like I'm a Christian life coach. I just, I am, I believe in practical applications and biblical principles, but now really looking at it from a biblical perspective, it's just very different and a different approach. And so this is like a kickoff for me to share of just the story that is a familiar passage, but a revelation that I think would be, I guess, inspirational, maybe motivational for anyone who's going into the coaching profession, or if they have been a coaching profession, if they're anyone who's going into it, or they've been a coach, whatever type of coach. When I did the lesson originally, when I wrote my notes and did it live with a group of people, I talked about it from a coach's perspective and a client perspective. But I think what I'm going to do, and I have like pages of notes here. I always have notes. My background is an educator, so I always have notes. Well, what I am going to do is talk mostly from the coach's perspective because I believe coaches have a huge responsibility. And if you are a coach, consultant, thought leader, who's a believer in Jesus Christ, you have to say that, then there are some responsibilities that we have. So I've said my prayer to get myself started. Hope you're touching in agreement with me as well. And I am going to read the passage with the woman with the issue of blood. And when I did this live, I labeled it Renew, Redefine, and Rise, a message for coaches, thought leaders, and entrepreneurs. And so those are the people that I am talking to: coaches, leaders, thought leaders, and entrepreneurs. And then mostly entrepreneurs in the space of where you have a product or service that you are in, I guess, high touch or some type of contact with somebody to teach them something or to move them forward. So it could go for any entrepreneur. But if you are making tape dispensers, maybe you can learn something for like your team, but it's really for the people who are teaching, consulting, or who have an influence or impact over people's lives and instructing them to do better, be more, have more. Okay. So the first passage that I'm going to read is from Matthew chapter 9, verses 20 and 22. And it said, and I'm reading from the Amplified version. So I study from King James version. The King James version is mostly is on my phone, and my physical Bible is the Amplified version. So I go between both of those, but I'll be reading out the Amplified version. So Matthew chapter 9, verses 20 through 22 says, Then a woman who had suffered from a hemorrhage for 12 years came up behind him as in Jesus, and touched the fringe of his outer robe. For she had been saying to herself, If I only touch his outer robe, I will be healed. But Jesus, turning and seeing her, said, Take courage, daughter. Your personal trust and confident faith in me has made you well. And at once the woman was completely healed. So that was Matthew chapter 9, verses 20 and 22, 20 through 22. Now we go over to Mark chapter 5, verses 24 through 34. This is a longer passage. So what did I say? 20, starting at verse 24. And Jesus went with him, and a large crowd followed him and pressed in around him from all sides. A woman in the crowd had suffered from a hemorrhage for 12 years and had endured much suffering at the hands of many physicians. She spent all that she had and was not helped at all, but instead had become worse. She had heard reports about Jesus, and she came up behind him in the crowd and touched his outer robe. For she thought, if I just touch his clothing, I will get well. Immediately her flow of blood was dried up, and she felt in her body and knew without any doubt that she was healed of her suffering. Immediately, Jesus, recognizing in himself that power had gone out from him, turned around in the crowd and said, Who touched my clothes? His disciples said to him, You see all the crowd pressing in around you from all sides, and you ask, Who touched me? Still, he kept looking around to see the woman who had done it. Interesting. How did he know it's a woman? Anyway, and the woman, though she was afraid and trembling, aware of I know how he know, but I'm just saying how he knew. I'm saying in general. And the woman and the woman, though she was afraid and trembling, aware of what had happened to her, came and fell down before him and told him the whole truth. Then he said to her, Daughter, your faith, your personal trust and confidence in me has restored you to health. Go in peace and be permanently healed from your suffering. Verse 35. While he was still speaking, some people came from the synagogue official's house, saying to Jairus, Your daughter has died. Why bother the teacher any longer? Overhearing what was being said, Jesus said to the synagogue officials, Do not be afraid. Only keep believing in me and my power. And he allowed no one to go with him as witnesses except Peter and James and John, the brother of James. They came to the house of the synagogue official, and he looked with understanding at the uproar and commotion, and people loudly weeping and wailing and mourning. While he had gone in, he said to them, Why make a commotion and weep? The child is not dead. The child has not died, but is sleeping. Oh, I was supposed to stop at 34, but I'm just finish the story. Okay, you woke up the little girl. I was supposed to stop at 34. I got caught up in the story, but there is a correlation between the woman and the little girl. All right, and then lastly, we're going to, well, no, let me read Luke chapter 4, verse 23, because I have that written down in my notes. I forgot to pin it because I was like, why do I have that? So, Luke chapter 4, verse 23. So he said to them, you will no doubt quote this proverb to me, physician, heal yourself. Whatever miracles that we heard were done by you in Capernaum, do here in your hometown as well. Okay, so I have that as physicians because notice when I said in Matthew that the lady had gone to all the physicians and spent her money and Jesus has healed this lady. So they were kind of like mocking him and say, you physician, and things like that. So I wanted to point that out. And then we go to Luke chapter 8, verses 42 through 48. Yeah. For he had only, wait, well, I'll start at 41 because 42 is an odd place to start. Now, a man named Jairus, a synagogue official to him, came to him and fell at Jesus' feet and began begging him to come to his house. For he had an only daughter, about 12 years old, and she was dying. But as Jesus went, the people were crowding against him, almost crushing him. And the woman who had suffered from a hemorrhage for 12 years had spent all of her money on physicians and could not be healed by anyone, came up behind him and touched the fringe of his outer robe, and immediately her bleeding stopped. Jesus said, who touched me? While they were all denying it, Peter and those who were with him said, Master, the people are crowding and pushing against you. But Jesus said, someone did touch me because I was aware that power to heal had gone out of me. When the woman saw that she had not escaped notice, she came up trembling and fell down before him. She declared in the presence of all the people the reason why she had touched him and how she had been immediately healed. He said to her, daughter, your faith, your personal trust and confidence in me has made you well. Go in peace, untroubled, undisturbed, well-being. And okay. And so if you see me looking down a lot, that is because I am reading from my notes because I want to make sure that I take my time and hit these points. And I know for me, I can go like all off the radar. So I just want to make sure that I stay on point to get this point out. All right. So in the passage, the if you understand how the Bible works, it's never anything isolated, it's never anything haphazardly thrown together. And I grew up like they were just stories, but they're not just isolated stories. In the passages, the woman who had the issue of blood is sandwiched between, I think, in one passage, the demon possessed man, but in the other ones, they end with Jairus' daughter, who's 12 years old. So Jesus was not, she was like an interruption, quote unquote, interruption. The lady who had the issue of blood, I think another one was with the lame man, depending on what parts of, I guess, the shore or whose perspective that was telling the story. Maybe, Matthew saw when he first got off the boat and when he did a miracle there. Perhaps, Luke's encounter was when he went a little further down the road. They all know that he ended up at Jairus's house. And so and depending on where they were in their perspective, depending on how much detail they went into the story, but her story is sandwiched in between two miracles that Jesus did. One correlation is that it was a young girl who was dying that was 12 years old, and this woman who had the issue of blood for 12 years, an older woman. So there's some symbolism there. So these are the revelations and the downloads that I received when I was studying this passage. Of course, anybody who reads this story, you will pick up your own revelation because that's how the word of God is the living word, because everyone gets fresh and interpretation. Even as I was reading the passages again, I had to stay focused because I got a new revelation. You heard me stop and one of them said, well, wait, how did he know? Even though Jesus is God, fully God, fully man. Of course he knew, but in the natural sense, he was like, how did he know it was a woman? That's something, I want to go back and study. So I encourage you to read for yourself and don't get so lax with certain Bible studies. Like I grew up in the church. I know these stories, but just knowing them is not enough, right? And especially understanding what this world really is, the spiritual realm. And when you're talking about people, especially with life coaching or helping them in different areas of their lives, and when people come to you and tools and things stop working, that's because there's something deeper. I don't go too deep into the lesson here, but I just want people to understand that even though I'm talking on the practical side, it doesn't stop at the practical side. It's really spiritual. And that is why Jesus didn't talk about her physical issue. He talked about her well-being, but we'll get into that. All right. So the passage points out 12 years. And one thing I want you to notice is that, well, there are a lot of things. So pencil and paper ready if you choose to take notes. We never know the woman's name. And I've learned that when the Bible does not specifically say a person's name, so they'll say either unnamed or a certain woman, a certain man, that is for us to know that these are regular people and we can really insert ourselves. Honestly, we can insert ourselves in a lot of what the known characters of the Bible, the individuals of the Bible, but it's a little easier in my opinion when you don't know the person's name. Like we know Jairus is an official of the synagogue, and you know, with him having a daughter who he thought was dead, and Jesus healed or woke his daughter up, it's easy to say, well, he's of course it works for him because he's an official. He has a high level of leadership. He has status. He has authority. Of course, it worked. But when the Bible does a certain man or a certain woman, or a certain child, or whatever, that there is no name, no background, or anything, then it's easier for us to put ourselves in that situation. So that is what I want to point out. Another thing from my perspective, when we talk about the 12 years of suffering, for me, it I thought about a lot of us who go through traditional education, especially at the beginning. A lot of us, especially in the United States, go through 12 years of school. Now, you may have had pre-K and all that, but it is 12 years. And if you don't know, my background is in education. So I understand I understand how education really works. The system. I know that it was not meant to do all the things that people think it's going to be, because I literally studied the history of education. I was like, oh, that's why y'all created this. But I didn't know that until I got into my doc program. So I was already teaching, but I still was going against the rules. So I was like, this does not make sense. Like, we cannot just keep telling the kids what to do. But anyway, there are 12 years, and it is 12 years of like almost suffering, or people telling you what you have to be, what you can't do, how to think, and there's like no creativity there for the most part. Or you may have been in a corporate training, in a corporate job, and you've been there for 12 years and there's no progress. Or just look at, maybe there's a chunk of period in time where you've been there 12 years or more and suffering. So I think the 12 years, even though there is a correlation with Jairus' daughter being 12, I counted this as 12 years of you being indoctrinated with something, usually like the school system. And so then knowing that she dealt with this same one issue for 12 years is something else. If you look at your life and you're thinking, I've been in this same rut, or I've had this same illness, or I've had these same financial problems, or I've had these same relationship issues, whatever the case may be, for 12 years, it's like, wow, will there ever be a resolution? So that is why it's like, put yourself in that situation so you can kind of follow along. But remember, my perspective and how I'm going to talk about this moving forward is for coaches, thought leaders, and entrepreneurs, and you can insert yourself there if you are vibing. All right, so I have that there. We've been programmed either for a long period of time to be able to think one way. You've been indoctrinated. You can say you've been in the same church for 12 years, just indoctrinated, or you've had the same issue. Then I have, is it possible that she knew the solution, but since she couldn't get to Jesus, she had to settle for local physicians and spend all of her money? So, I'm asking a lot of questions. Let me just stay on track. Let me just follow the notes I have here. My green screen is like tripping. All right, so I don't get carried away. I'm going to ask a series of questions and just for you to think on your own so I don't make this any longer. And then the next question is it possible that you internally know your next move to make, but instead of being patient or wait on the one who knows the answer, or or seek internal guidance, we go to people who we think have the answer. God has already downloaded into us, those of us, well, He downloaded into everyone He's created, but those of us who are believers, we have access to those things that He's given us. And you have to ask yourself, if you already there, the eternal solution is there inside of you, but instead of trying to seek guidance first, do you go look for outside support? And even you, as a coach, a thought leader, or entrepreneur, this applies to you too, and not just for the people that you are helping and serving. I wanted to focus on especially the people who are doing the giving, the serving, the teaching, because what I found is a lot of times, like when I was teaching, whether that was in K-12 or at the collegiate level, a lot of emphasis were always placed on what the students needed to do, what the students need to learn. And I was like, well, who's going to train the teachers, the professors, the administrators, the faculty, whatever. And that's why a lot of things happen or don't happen because the emphasis is too much on the students. So for you, this is you. Don't take notes that, oh, I'm going to use this with my client or use this with my team. No, you ask yourself these questions as we go through this. So then I say, is it possible that if you are patient with the one who has a solution, maybe you wouldn't have spent all of your money on unnecessary programs? Now, let me say this and put this out there if I don't jump off script. I did this for a study for myself. So all of these questions that I am asking you, I had to sit with these questions and answer these questions for myself. I have invested highly in programs, coaches, consultants, experts and things like that. And while right now I can say I learned a lot, good, bad, or indifferent from all of them, I know that some of them just didn't need to be invested in, right? Some of those coins definitely could have been saved had I followed what I knew to follow. And that means seeking guidance from God first, seeking wise counsel from God first, and then letting Him lead me to who He wanted me to partner with for wise counsel here on earth. So this is not to judge you. This is a safe space, meaning that don't feel judged. I am not talking at you. I'm not talking down to you. This is something that I personally had to deal with. And I was like, oh my gosh, I wonder if anybody else out there is feeling a certain type of way. Now, it may come off like it's a little harsh because I'm teaching you from the other side. Like, if you have not experienced this, then it's almost like a warning. You don't have to experience this. Okay. So I want to put that out there. So these questions or statements that I'm making, that's where it's coming from. All right. So, yeah, so unnecessary coaching programs. Perhaps Holy Spirit would have led you, like I said, to wise counselor or coaching, or to someone that was more aligned with what you needed in a season. This doesn't always mean going to someone that has the label of Christian whatever or faith-based whatever, or someone who works with women of faith or men in faith. That's not always what that means because they can be a little janky too, right? But it means that you do take a step back and say, well, God, is this the person? Because sometimes He may tell you to go with someone who may not be like a believer like you, but that skill set that they have or that knowledge that they have, they're the ones who God chose to work through for you to partner with. So don't judge. That's why you go to wise counsel first, because you can make the mistake of going through unnecessary programs just because somebody say that they believe in God or they are a Christian, insert whatever expert, and they help women and men in faith. And you're like, oh, that's me. You must be aligned. And that's not the case, because same with me. Just because I'm doing this Bible study and you may be like, oh yes, this is great. Let me go look her up. And I love all of that. I may not be the one for you. So that's why you go consult wise counsel with God first, and Holy Spirit will lead you there. All right. So then it says, I have the woman ran out of physical currency and she had to rely on her supernatural currency with faith. It wasn't the act alone of touching Jesus' garment, it was her intention behind it. So I don't know about you, but have you gotten to the end of your actual money and said, there, I can't take not one more program, because you're in search for a solution? You've been in this place of pain, this place of suffering for so long. And I'll say this, maybe you did go to God in prayer, or you went to your prayer partners, or you prayed and you're like, okay, and nothing worked. So you thought, well, just this doesn't work. Prayer doesn't work. Or maybe you have grown up in church like I did and you still saw people who fully, so like my whole thing, especially within the last few years, is like, I don't want to be a casual Christian. I don't want to be a broke Christian. I don't want to be that Christian that just settles for, well, this is how life is and I'll get my reward in heaven. I didn't want to be that type of Christian, but I just didn't understand how some people were like making it in life and some people were just existing in life. And then I'll be honest, I looked at people who were in the world, and this is why a lot of people, and you can say how you feel in the comments, but this is why a lot of people look at entertainers and celebrities or people outside of the church and they think that's success, because it's like, well, they're living the life. And I was like, well, how come Christians can't do that? Or why, if someone who says that they're Christian, that they have money or status or nice things and wealth, and yes, I'm talking about material things, then it's like, oh, they must be crooked, or they don't really believe in God. Like, why does it have to be like that? And especially when you really read the Bible, especially talking about heaven with streets paved of gold, and that's one thing to say, yeah, my reward is in heaven, but when you read like the Bible, especially in the Old Testament, how they built these things, they were using like high luxury items in the physical. They weren't just waiting in heaven. So it was like, well, how come everybody, like most of the people who believe, be struggling? And the people who be like, man, forget Jesus, or I don't care nothing about, or I don't, that life doesn't have anything to do with me. They're living it up. I understand why now. I've done my study, but that's where all of this came from. And so I was like, oh, it is possible. There's just some different things you have to do and know and understand. Why didn't I know this? All right. That was just a quick aside, but I wanted to share that because I am going to talk about money later on. So just brace yourself. Excuse me. Okay. So the currency is money, is flow. So she obviously had some. So then it's like, well, we've had some because a lot of us have made these investments in these programs and coaches. And now it's like we're at the end of all of that. Well, the lady, she had to use her currency of faith. So now you ask yourself, and this is the thing, it was never God's plan for us to get to the end of our resources and then have to rely on faith. He's like, if you'd have relied on faith in the first place, you would have still had your currency. So if you have not gone down that path, this is what I'm telling you, preventative, tips. So now faith. So it's not just enough just to believe. Then she touched his robe. It was not just enough to touch it. The two had to go together. She had to touch the hem of his garment with intention. And so could it be that when we seek wise counsel in these programs, and I'm calling it wise counsel But a lot of us just be going searching for stuff that was already inside of us. We don't think that we're good enough, or we don't know the answers. We that whole bondage of 12 years or however long you were indoctrinated with something, all that plays a part as to why it was so much searching going on. Okay. And so I have, could it be that when you did seek wise counsel, and you started working with a coach or a person to learn certain skills, could it be that you weren't showing up with a level of belief in yourself? Did you have a level of unbelief, or you lacked the faith towards what you've been presented with? So if you're in a program, or you're working with someone or taking a course, and they're telling you the things that you need to do, like these are the steps that you follow, and you're like doing them just to go through it, or you tried it and it didn't work the first time, so you think it doesn't work, or you don't believe that you can get through it. So there's a lot of unbelief there. There is no faith there. And the reason why the woman was healed is because she had faith going in. She she knew it would work, but it was kind of like, I am going to expect for it to work, but she had no evidence for herself that it will work. Just you know what I'm saying? Now you'll hear me say that there could have been evidence, but it's like, I'm going to do this. I believe it's going to do it, but there's no one said like, hey, if you go touch the hem of his garment, you will be healed. No one told her that. So when we approach these courses for coaches, thought leaders, and entrepreneurs, when you're learning a new skill, going to another level, and you're like, well, this isn't working, and you revert to where you have been, is it because of your lack of faith or your lack of belief, either in yourself or in the process that you are encountering? So then I also have that it could have also been that you put your trust and confidence in a coach or a program instead of God. Now, these are for the people who believe in Jesus Christ. And now here's the thing. There are people who don't have a relationship with God, but they have more faith and trust in what they're doing in themselves or in the person that is supporting them than we do in God. But we'll go to the people or the program, and before we go to God, and then we get mad when it doesn't work, and then we come back crying to God, and God was like, but that's where you went in the first place. You should have come to me first. So you like, I built up all my faith, I put everything I had in this, I gave it my all. Why is it working? And then God was like, well, you didn't give me your all, you didn't come to me. So that is something to look at there. You see my book. So then I have, could it be that you're really one of the people in the crowd and not really executing? A lot of people don't like when I say this, because it puts the ownership back on them. Remember, in each one of those passages, there were a crowd of people that were there. Jesus was healing and doing miracles from the time he got off to shore to going to Jairus' house, and he kept going and, doing what Jesus does, what he doing Jesus, right? And there were people who were there to really listen and learn from him. There were people there to be nosy. There were people to be like, oh, it's a crowd over there. What's happening over there? There are people in search for healing. And sometimes it's like when you're in these programs and you're learning, or you're in these masterminds, everyone is not there for the same reason. I didn't know that. Even though I taught school and I was a professor, I knew like people had either showing up because they had to be there, or the parents made them. But everyone didn't have the same end goal for my class. So I knew that. But in the world of entrepreneurship, I'm thinking, or even in personal development, I'm like, well, we're all in this mastermind. Clearly, we want to get, better with ourselves, understand ourselves more, this, that, and the other, or learn this skill. And that wasn't the case. Some people just wanted to be around the coach or the leader just to say that they were there. Isn't that crazy? So you have to ask yourself, have you been that person that just showed up because of this person's name? We know I'll just give his initials, TR, the biggest life coach in the industry. I think he probably started the industry. And it's like you just go to one of his programs just to be in a room, not even trying to learn anything. You just there to see and see who else is going to show up. And then you wonder like, well, I went to his event or I went to his program. Why didn't it work for me? And I see these people because it's like why did your motives weren't right? So that was another perspective. You have to ask yourself, which one are you? Which one of y'all? All right. So then the woman spoke up in the crowd and risked being found out, risking her brand and her reputation. When you are seeking counsel, support, and I'll say wise counsel, learning a skill, and you don't know something, now you're already a coach or a thought leader, an entrepreneur. You got your credentials, your credits, your testimonials, like you get results, like people know you. But when you don't know something and you're in the crowd, are you willing to risk your reputation of not knowing? See, I have up here the School of Brilliance. And for me, with a lot of credentials behind my name, in front of my name, there are times when I would not ask a question because I'm like, I am doctor. I will figure this out on my own. When that was unnecessary because one of the main reasons why you pay for support is so you can get through things sooner, quicker, faster, right? So it was like, why would you pay for speed, but then you put the brakes on your own progress because you won't do what you went there for. You went there for help and to learn because you didn't want to research on your own or you didn't even know what to research. But now you're here with the people, you invested the time and the money, but now you're going to spend even more time trying to figure out something where you could have just asked and got it done immediately because of your reputation. So I have here, like, are you willing to open your mouth in the presence of authority? And I don't mean authority like, it's some like, oh, they tell me what to do. But if you're in their program or, you're working with them and they're your main coach or strategists, they are the ones in the authority, right? They're the expert. Or if you're in a group and you don't understand something, are you willing to ask a question or even put your work on display? I don't, well, I kind of do know where, especially those of us who are high achievers, elite performers, peak performance, and go getters, we were already like on display to do our work, or we were already good at being the best at something. But when we feel insecure about not knowing if it's not right, we're not going to say anything until we know it's perfect. And when I say perfect, like it's done, I did it right, and it may have one mistake but it ain't gonna have many. Versus some people get in there and say, I'm just gonna throw the spaghetti on the wall, this is why I'm here, help me sort this out. So it's like, are you willing to do that? And then when you have this level of expertise and you've gotten to this status, are you still willing to put your work out and to be evaluated, especially by your peers? I know I did not do that for the first few years I started investing myself going into these programs, when they would say, hey, who put their landing page together, who put their media kit together, let's see it. Or the coach would say, let me do an audit of, let's say, your email sequence and go through that. And I was like, I ain't putting my stuff out there. What you not gonna do? Because part of the program in my head was like, I don't went through all the evaluation I need to go through. I'm just here for you to tell me what to do. It doesn't make sense, but that's just how my brain was working at the time. So even if I knew it was good, I was like, I don't trust y'all like that. I don't want you to talk about my stuff. Just trust that I know that I listen to you and I execute it. And that's not the way to be. So then I have the woman did not hide her success or her testimony. So even though she was a little shy about it, she still came forward. And that's important because the question I have for you is that I want to know, have you been hiding those good things God has done for you because you think that it's insignificant, or you're still dealing with some form of self-worth? And a lot of the programs, they do ask you for, like, what's your win today? And you may hear people share their wins, and it's like, I closed 10 clients this week. I wrote 15 books. I, secured a contract. I made $1 million, all those things. And you're like, I completed an email sequence, or I made a workbook, or I organized my desk today after weeks of doing nothing. So you're just like, I'm not sharing that. And what I learned is if we won't share those small wins and be excited about those, why do we think God is going to give us something big? And he was like, you didn't appreciate the fact that you were in a ball of depression and I helped you finally get up and we broke whatever was happening with you and you did something you haven't done in weeks. Like that was major. And you just going to brush that off and you wonder why you don't have 32 clients and that's what you're waiting on to celebrate. So don't look at your wins as insignificant because especially if you are already at this level and you're getting now if you're going into real coaching programs or real masterminds, there are going to be people that are smarter than you, without a doubt, smarter than you, or who've gotten more success than you. Even with my credentials, there could be someone either with more credentials or someone with no credentials, but they've achieved something that I want to achieve. So I can't be intimidated, right? And you can't be intimidated. And then that's where the self-worth come in. You don't want to wake that up in yourself. So then I have another question, or are you just keeping the good news to yourself and being a hoarder, or are you afraid of being judged? So you see how all of those things, you have to look at your actions. And yes, all of this I pulled out of that one little passage, right? So you have to look at your actions of why you're not doing something because how you're acting is a belief that you have about yourself. All right, moving on. I said the woman had personal trust and confidence in Jesus, who is the ultimate coach, consultant, entrepreneur, all of that. And her issue was healed immediately. Restoration is marked by speed. I heard that from a prophetess. And then when I started doing my own study in the Bible, every time God, Jesus did some sort of restoration, made things back to where they were, it always was suddenly, immediately, in one day. It was quick. Okay. And so, could it be that you're still suffering with your business, your career, your health, your relationships, finances, family, insert whatever, because your personal trust and confidence is in the physical coach or the program and not in Jesus Christ? Again, I'm talking to the believers because here's the thing: a lot of non-Christians, they got their own personal trust. They say in themselves or whatever they call in spirit, they got their personal trust and confidence in something and is moving them. So if we know the ultimate coach, consultant, creator, entrepreneur, thought leader, the ultimate one, what are we tripping for? Why are we putting our confidence in the thing or the person he created or the person who created the thing, which means he ultimately created the thing, the program, the course that you're in, right? So this is not to say that you don't go to people to learn more. Although God put everything inside of us that we need, He didn't put everything. So that means I don't have everything to get to my next level. That means I need to go partner with someone because they have what I need to move forward. And then that person doesn't have everything. It may not be from me, it may be with someone else, but there's somebody else who need what I have for them to go to their next level. And that's how we use each other here on earth. Not in a bad way of using, but that's how we work together. But we don't substitute the ultimate for that person. They're just a vessel. Same thing with the course. If you took a course, that's just a vessel or an avenue to get your attention or to download the information, so don't put your trust and confidence fully in a person or a thing. Then I have here the woman knew Jesus credentials. So remember I told you that there were a lot of things happening. He didn't just come off the boat and go boom. He encountered her. It was either on certain instances there was a lame man he healed, there was a man possessed with demons, and whatever else was happening before he got to where she was. She either could have heard about his reputation and his credentials as she was growing up, the stories were passed down, or she could have known him just for that short time of, oh, did he just heal that lame man? Well, perhaps he can do the same for me. So the reason why I brought that up is sometimes if you're focusing on a person that has a big name and you're like, okay, of course they could do what they're going to do for me because it did for all these other people. But then it could be someone who doesn't have like the big name, but they still have success stories and a track record. So you want to make sure that you don't just look at the physical, you look at some results that they actually produce. And then I have that she believed just those stories of people, there was social proof. So for you do want to see some social proof, but you want to make sure that you're looking at the social proof that's aligned with you, not just because like, oh, this person helped this person make $100 million in their business. I'm gonna go work for them when God, there's no one on your radar that God wants you to grow $100 million business. I'm not saying that you can't, but maybe He wants you to do something else. But because your focus is over here, because you're looking at that type of credential, then you're out of alignment. Maybe He wants you to see the person and work with the coach or the consultant to get you to that level because you're already one, and because you're in, let's say you're an entrepreneur and you see $100 million. Oh yeah, I definitely want that for my business. I'm going to go work for that person based on those credentials and results that they have. But maybe He's like, well, you might want to go look at this person over here because on their credentials or their social proof, they've helped somebody heal the broken relationship they had with a parent or a sibling or a child. And you're like, forget that, but that could be what you need in that moment, and you can't get that $100 million until you deal with that issue. So you want to make sure that when you're looking at social proof, it's because of what God is folks told you, like, hey, you need to work on this, or this is where I want you to go next, and you get into alignment that way. She focused on healing. Now, I'm not gonna say she didn't know about the demon possessed man. I didn't go too deep into that story, but let's say that she did hear about the man who was lame, and she was like, "Well, sound close enough to me," you know. And that's part of the social proof that she looked at. That was the story she believed, that thing right there, because she needed that thing. Not that she wanted it, like I'm walking fine. I don't need to walk. But it was the fact of healing. That's the social proof she focused on. And that was the credential that she was after with Jesus. Jesus could have done a whole bunch of things, but it was just, oh, He healed. That's what I'm going to Him for specifically. Then I said, and I asked the question, could you lack immediate success from your focus on the coach's credentials more than Jesus' credentials? Again, similar thing. Now, He could have told you to look at a certain person with those things, that level of social proof. But like I said, maybe you're going after the 100 million because that's what they're saying. And you're like, well, I'm going to go to that person. That person is the one who's going to help me get my 100 million. And Jesus is like, word? You, and do you know what $100 million is to me? That's nothing. But you're going to go to this man and focus on that instead of coming to me. So we have to be careful about what are we looking at and the credentials, because the ultimate person, now again, these are believers. We look at the ultimate coach, consultant, thought leader, entrepreneur, which is Jesus Christ, and we look at His track record. So you want to be very careful, especially if you're going to your next level. You want to be very careful of who you are looking at to get your next your next shift. Okay. And then I asked and I say, well, who has the most powerful resume? Again, I talked about that one coach, and or I guess he's a business strategist now too. And you're like, well, I'm going to go to him because he's supposed to be the best. And true enough, he may be, but then it could be something that he can't help you with, because you need to go to God. And maybe that's why it goes all the way back to the beginning. You may not have to spend any currency if you just have faith. God will let you know if you need, when it's time to invest, and when I say invest, like take a course or work with a coach, just like if you're going to school or getting training or going back to college, he'll tell you that's the next step, but your first currency is faith. All right. So then I have, even with belief and faith, total trust and confidence in Jesus, the woman still had to do something. She had to get into action. So let's say you know all of that. You showed up in the program, you believe, or work with a coach, and you believe that this is what Jesus has for you or God has for you, and you get in there and you do nothing. And I said, it doesn't matter if you did sign up with a God aligned coach and he tells you this is the person you need to work with. He's done. He told you. You went to him, you asked him for instructions. Okay, God, how can I grow my business next? Who do you want me to go to? Okay, God, now I've been speaking on these topics, I've been writing these books. Now I want to go to another level in this. Who do you want me to work with? I've been a coaching consultant, I've been doing great, but I want to attract different types of clients. Who do you want me to go to? And he told you where to go. You get there and do nothing, and then or you don't execute it to the level where you know you need to execute, and you're like, well, I don't know what happened. I went to the best, or I did everything God said, but you didn't get into action. Again, the lady heard about Jesus' credentials. She had the faith and the confidence and all of that, but she still had to reach out and touch. Reach out and touch. Okay, she still had to do that. So you have to get into action. So then I said, even if you got into a Destiny Fulfilled program, it doesn't matter unless you act with intention. So you can show up, you can get on the calls, you can do, just be there. But if you're not executing to whatever they're telling you to do with intention, then it's not going to work. All right. So then the next part is the woman didn't even touch the whole garment or the whole fabric, just like a little tassel or a little hem or a little piece of fabric. And I have like sometimes when because you have this certain level of status, the know-it-all, the success, you get to somewhere and you want to know all the details before you get into action. You're like, I want to know how many calls I'm going to have, or what does the full program look like? What do I get on this end? This, that, and the other, blah, blah, blah. And it was like, look, you just sign up and we'll take care of the rest. But no, that doesn't work for you. The lady didn't have to go say, Jesus, let me hold your robe real quick. Let me put on this whole thing. Absolutely not. She just touched a little bit. So what if God is putting you in this season to where you just need to literally trust step by step. When he tell you to do something, the instructions, you are obedient and you do it, and you wait for the next instructions instead of having the whole plan. Because sometimes what happens when you reach a level, you're like, I've done that groundwork before. I did trust and let God lead me to the next step, and you got some success and you think that you're above that now. And you're like, well, at this point, just show me the whole thing, because I'm gonna do it anyway. And God may be saying that's why you're still at this level, because we're doing something new. You want to go to a leap or a next stratosphere, because we're not talking about step levels, and that's something else I need to talk about. We're talking about going to another stratosphere. It's going to require another strategy, right? All right, that's beyond. This is why I got to stick to the script. All right. So I said, and then sometimes you think you need to have an extensive program. It needs to be a full year, or you need a certification, or it has to take, all these calls. And sometimes it doesn't. I used to look at certain masterminds that were like, well, it's $55,000, but we meet, like quarterly or once a month, or it doesn't sound like it's like for $55,000, I need to talk to y'all every week and twice on Sundays, right? But when you're at a different level, especially with a different level of focus and intention, and you get into action, you realize that it doesn't take much. Sometimes, like you're chugging along, you do a check-in, you just need a quick tweak, and going on and on. Sometimes when there's it's like so much interaction, so many calls, like so many this, that, and the other. It's like a crutch. So you just have to be careful with that. So then I had the woman was healed and made whole after one action, one conversation. And that's where I say, like, sometimes it doesn't take all of that. You think I need to be in a program like every week. We need to be here for 3 hours a day or 3 hours a week. I just need to be here. They need to talk to me every time I send an email. They need to be right there. And if you really execute and listen and follow the instructions, you'll realize that it only takes one time. I know somebody that charges, or their rates, I think it's $185,000 to work with them one-on-one for a year, but they only get like 10 calls out of the year. They don't even get the full 12, like once a month. And they get to use them however frequently. If they use all 12 and all 10 up front, then I don't think the person allows them to do that. But it's like you get 10. choose accordingly, like be wise. So because that coach knows it doesn't take all that. You're already highly successful. And I want you, especially if you're doing true coaching, it's like I'm here to help you find your own solutions, really. I'm not here to tell you what to do. You hire a consultant for that. But even consultants are like, look, just follow what I told you to do. You don't need me to handhold, right? Anyway, getting off topic. All I'm saying is you don't need as much as you think you do. So trust that because it is not like she said, oh, let me touch it again. Or let me keep touching it until we get to Jairus's house. All right. So then I have here from Mark chapter 5, verses 24 through 34. And I found this when I was researching. It's like the woman of the issue of blood. Now, this is where we get to it. She did the woman who had the issue of blood with the issue of blood because it wasn't her issue. It was just something that was attached to her. She had money. Think about it. If you could afford to go to the doctors, multiple physicians for the same problem over and over, even if you had insurance, you still had to pay something because at this point, I know she was going to specialists, right? So you've been having this issue. You don't go to the same level of people. You keep escalating, and as you escalate, that costs more money. So she had money, and what I want to point out to you is that one, she had money. Two, she had some level of status because even back then, people looked at women like second class, third class citizens, right? So for her to even be in the presence of the physicians, she had to have status and money. So, as women, I want us to recognize that it is okay for us to have status and money. And did you know that there were a lot of women who funded the ministry of Jesus with those disciples? It was more than 12 disciples, but those are the ones we know. And there were a lot of women that were funding the ministry. And, think about it. They walked and went to all these places. Now, one time, did Jesus pull out a credit card, stripe, a little coin bag? Not one time. Now, of course, it's like, well, it's Jesus, but Jesus had the crew. They weren't doing that. One time he needed money. He got like, look, the fish, we got to pay taxes. Fine. Go get the money out the fish mouth. Literally, or I need a ride. Go to this man's house and tell him I need this donkey. Or we needed some eat. Hey, tell the little boy. But even outside of those, like we don't know everyday living. So there were people that still had to, get new sandals, new robes, they had to eat. So women, a lot of women funded the ministry. So women, that means we need to have some money to help a lot of these missions and ministries move forward. And I believe that the reason why a lot of things aren't happening is because we don't have the level of wealth that we need, the level of resources, or even the access to the resources to do those things. This is why in the beginning I said I just didn't want to be this casual Christian. Like I wanted tangible things. And of course, yeah, I like luxury. I liked luxury even when I was working as a public school teacher. I believe that's just something God put inside of me. So it had nothing to do with I was gonna find a way, and not to be like, oh, I got to go and use my last just for this. No, it's just certain things I like. But when you get to that level, then it was like, man, if I heard that a friend was struggling like with groceries or something or struggling with rent. Wouldn't it be nice if I could, write that check, or a friend couldn't somebody I know couldn't get they were struggling for to get a car, and wouldn't it be nice if I could just write that check or go to the bank or just get the car for them? um, Somebody wants to go off to college and their family can't afford it, and instead of them having to run out in and get a loan, wouldn't it be nice? Or somebody wants to go study, culinary overseas, but they just don't know how to do that. And wouldn't it be a great experience if I could just write the check? And so you see, that is the real reason to want to have these resources. But yet, because she didn't know about the master healer, or didn't have access, or didn't think she had access, or whatever the case may be, she had to use those resources on herself, run out, and then come to like, okay, all I got is faith. What if this is the time where we use faith first and then go to God and say, okay, now the resources that you are going to bless me with, I can use them to advance the kingdom instead of worrying about my situation because I messed up, going to places for help that I need to be going. I spent all my money. All right. I just wanted to say that. So, again, you don't want to be afraid of money. You want to work on your money mindset. You want to understand that it was not just for men to have the wealth. We're supposed to be partners with them because, we look at money differently and we need that harmony for both for business and money. All right. So next I have, regardless of the money and status, her issue was an internal issue and caused her to be labeled unclean. So her issue was a dis-ease. It means it was dis-ease and it was stubborn and better and inveterate. I had to write it out. I was like, what is that word? That's what I looked it up. And it says having a particular habit or activity that is long established and unlikely to change. So she knew once she realized, like, when the physicians, I'm about to say coaches, when the physicians were honest with her and said, we cannot help you, this is something deeper or beyond the scope of what we can do. That means when they said that means it's terminal, that's it, there's nothing, it's not going to change. There could be something that you've gone to a coach for, a program, a consultant, a thought leader, somebody say, help me with this problem. There's nothing else we can do. And maybe you feel like, well, I done did all this. I can't return to Jesus and ask for help because I didn't come into the first place and you feel condemned. Don't do that. That's where we know that things are internal. If you're going and looking for physical solutions and things are still not working, that means it's an internal situation. And the longer that it stays internal, the longer it's going to stay unchanged because you're unaware of it. So when you're noticing something that's not working in the physical realm, let's say you went to a business strategist or a business coach and they tell you to create it's not that hard. Create a landing page, get a free offer, get some email sequences. Boom, you should have 1,000 leads a day. And you follow the exact same things that they're doing and it's not working for you, that means there's something internally that's happening. It can be in your mindset. If you go a little deeper, it's spiritual. That's beyond the scope of what we're talking about today, but we'll stop at mindset. It's an internal issue and it cannot be changed with ordinary method. So her ordinary method was going to the physician. Your ordinary method could be going to another culture consultant or a thought leader. And this could be in the church too. It could be going to a pastor, minister, somebody in the church, same thing. But if you're not looking at it from a supernatural perspective, it is not going to change because there's just some things that's going to take God, grace, and supernatural grit. And grit, part of my book. All right. So the woman's issue or the issue that she had, oh yeah, it was a blood issue. And I put that, isn't it interesting that her blood issue could only be restored by the blood of Jesus Christ. There's something like Jesus has a solution for everything. So there could be something that's not working at whatever level that you're at. You do have to look internally and see what exactly is it because it's not a business coach. It may not be what the life coach is telling you about this particular area. It may not be that, well, you're not using this particular speech technique or writing technique, to go to this level. It could be something internal. Maybe it could be unforgiveness or unworthiness or being unloved or feeling rejected, whatever that is. Jesus has a solution for that, but you have to turn inward, take some time for yourself, and go to Him specifically for that issue. I think a lot of times we're too general, and then well, Jesus paid it all. By Jesus' stripes, I am healed. But for you, not for Jesus, but for you, you need to know, well, what is He healing? So you know what to focus on. Just like the lady, I am going for this issue that I have to be healed in this moment for this. She probably could have had some other things going on. She was broke. She was in debt. She had no more money. She didn't go to Him for that because it was specifically, it's my body. I could care less about a business, money, whatever. I need this right here, this specific thing to stop because by Jesus' stripes we're healed. That means healed in prosperity, healed from everything, right? But it doesn't work that way because God, I believe God wants us to know why we're going, want us to know the specific reasons why we're going to Him, and that causes us not to be lazy Christians. All right. And here I have, like, sometimes we minimize like how powerful the blood is, and we forget about the power of the resurrection of Jesus. Especially if you grew up in church, it's easy to just to gloss over um those things. All right, I think I'm going to stop there, and then we'll wait for part two because I have a lot more to share and I don't want this video to be any longer. So we are going to wait for part two. Thank you so much for joining me, and we will be